So let's go ahead and start with your origin story. Three divorces, you have a doctorate, and now you have a best-selling book. You've really lived a whole Netflix series. What would you say has really lit the fire for you to really help others navigate heartbreak?
Well, first of all, I already had a fundamental interest in relationships from a very young age. So I used to read advice columns all the time and stuff like that. So I had that fundamental interest. But what took me to the marriage crisis realm, which I could never have imagined for myself, was having gone through one in 1992, 93. And we went to the best marriage therapist in town. And when he asked how motivated I was to work on the marriage, I said 0, but I want to take a break. He said, "Well, I can't help you then, if you don't want to work on your marriage." And so he sent us away, and we managed this incredibly stressful, awful, kicked up situation on our own, made a lot of mistakes. It affected our children, and that never well with me. And I always wondered, why couldn't that marriage therapist help us? And so I went out into the world, became a relationship guru in San Antonio, in the newspaper, on TV and radio there. But people complained I didn't have credentials. So I went to the graduate school there in marriage and family therapy. And when I started the program, I asked everybody and looked at the classes that we were taking, and there was nothing presented on couples in marriage crisis at all in the whole entire program. And I went to school there 5 years studying marriage and family therapy, and it was never mentioned. When I went to do my dissertation, I decided to do my dissertation on that subject. And I've pulled up an unbelievable amount of incredible research and information. And I just said, why don't people know about this? Why isn't this out there? It could literally save marriages and families. And so it's just one of those things where you find this motherload of information, you're interested in it yourself. And I said, well, dadgummit, I think if nobody else is going to put this out there, I'm going to do it. So for the last 20 years, I've been learning how to do it using the research and then, marriage and family therapy skills. And I've come up with an approach to help couples in crisis that really works and that they really appreciate is available. And since my book came out, I'm trying to get therapists to take it seriously and learn about it and start adopting some of these techniques and interventions in their own practices. So we can save the marriages that can be saved and help the ones that can't be saved part amicably and enter into a mutually satisfying co-parenting agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. Full disclosure, my husband and I at one point were on the brink of a divorce when we ourselves had our own couples therapy years ago. And then we recently actually starting it. And it's interesting because his individual therapist had suggested like doing therapy even when things are going good, just to potentially identify anything that might come up versus like when you're just like so far down the path where you're both just like, you might be reaching a point to where you're just like checked out and completely done. But before we kind of talk about that, you said before that divorce doesn't have to be the end, but rather a new chapter. Is there something that maybe helped you see it that way in your own life, especially when you're going through the thick of it?
In the marriages that end and you've got kids, you're still going to be a family till kingdom come. I mean, so I think a lot of people don't think of the original family unit now transformed into two separate households as the family, but I think it's very important to think in terms of that. And then in the process of marriage crisis management, we have to consider so many different things. Some people have mental disorders, and other people are really healthy and mentally and emotionally, and they just need to learn some relationship skills. And so sometimes it's just a minor tweaking that can really turn some things around. So it's because I'm always thinking about this. The internet knows that. And so when I'm on the iPad at night, it throws me save your marriage ads right in my face, so save your marriage in 60 days, save your marriage without taking your partner to a therapist. Hey, your partner doesn't even have to be there. And these things scare me to death because there are so many aspects of it that require serious knowledge and expertise. To that end, in all the 20 years I've been doing this, two of the spouses in marriage crisis committed suicide. And I knew they were going to commit suicide. And I knew just how to handle it and how to coach the wives of these two men that did that. And when you're dealing with people that aren't qualified, I fear that they might try to get people to stay together that are seriously mentally ill and should not be married. So these are the things that concern me. And I think that the whole thing is very, very serious. And you need somebody that understands all the little intricacies to help you through it. So my goal is always, and my inclination is to get people to reconcile if at all possible. The kids are numero uno, and we have to make sure that we do right by them. And so I like to think of myself as kind of a little angel that appears in the family
Oh,
who's advocating for the children all throughout the process. And when parents sometimes veer off the rails and start some nasty, funny business, I'm like that. I just pop in there and set them straight. Everything you do that's nasty will trickle down to your kids. So we're going to take the high road. So, like I said, there's a lot of pieces to it, but man, having a knowledgeable person sure makes a big difference when you're in a marriage crisis.
oh, absolutely. And I can speak from my own experience. My own parents at one point, they both have actually been remarried twice and divorced twice.
To each other?
Not to each other, to other people. So like to each other, and then they each married someone else and then divorced.
Okay.
I don't think they did marriage counseling for either of their second marriages, but to each other they did briefly. And I think they got to a point where their therapist was like, because my dad specifically, I'll say like he just didn't have really any interest in wanting to work on it or thought like there was anything on his side that he needed to work on. So ultimately the therapist was like, well, I mean, both of you aren't really willing to work on it. And then eventually they split for that reason and then many others. But it's been over 30 years now since they've been divorced. And it's been challenging because my dad specifically will, and I'm sure you've probably encountered this too, will like to like basically talk negatively about my mom at nauseum. He still does it to this day. And I think there are a lot of people that don't really realize that they're only, especially when the partners have split, at this point, the only person you're really harming is your kids by doing that. Is there any specific examples that you might have of couples who might be in an acrimonious relationship and who are co-parenting? What would you say to anyone who might be going through a situation like that?
Oh, man. Well, you're exactly right. It's absolutely against the rules to talk bad. The truth is, once you're divorced, you should not talk about your spouse, former spouse, one way or the other to your children, pro, against, or anything else. The only thing you're able to do without damaging your kids is say your mom's picking you up at 3.
Right.
Logistics. Even if you say, well, your mom's such a wonderful person, then your kids might get hopes for reconciliation or something like that. So
Okay.
we just want to keep it super, super neutral and just not say one thing or the other. I've been studying co-parenting dynamics a lot lately, and one of the things that keeps coming up in the research that I'm reading is every time you have either talk negative about your spouse or when you're with the spouse before you divorce or during or whenever, and you have heated disagreement, it causes your children extreme anxiety and stress. And so if you can just keep that in mind, that when you're doing that, that you're scaring your kids and traumatizing them. I mean, hopefully that would be a motivator to keep your consternation away from them at all costs. Just do not bring that into your children's lives.
100%. And when you're navigating couples therapy, are there any red flags that you would say that you might identify that, okay, this is definitely not going to work versus couples who you might realize, oh, this X, Y, and Z is worked out, like this is going somewhere. How do you go about that, like that thought process and realizing this isn't going to work, and how might you present it to that couple?
One of the ways I present it is I look at how much damage has been done and how serious the damage is. The way I look at it is in marriage, there's crimes. We all commit marital crimes. Some of them are parking ticket level, some are speeding tickets, some are reckless driving, some are drunk driving, some are felonies, and some are capital crimes that just the one crime in and of itself is divorce worthy if the partner chooses to divorce. So we have all the different levels. And so obviously, when I'm dealing with the marital felonies and let's say repeated marital felonies, then I'm going to be, and capital crimes too. Like I've had spouses, for example, that had affairs with their wife's sister, like something that's just so egregious and horrible that it's hard to ever overcome. That might be a capital crime right then and there. And so I would be speaking to the other spouse about how serious and terrible a violation that is and how difficult that would be to overcome and to be able to trust your spouse 100% again. So then also you have sex addiction, people who have cheated numerous times, or marital felonies fall usually within abuse, addiction, and adultery, the 3 A's. And then again, there's different levels of affairs and different levels of addiction and stuff like that. And is the person going into recovery from whatever addictions they have, or are they still in it? There's so many considerations. The worst are the seriousness of the crime and the repeatedness of it is going to be a predictor that we might not be able to save your marriage, and maybe we shouldn't even try.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I actually want to speak on younger couples because this is something that I've noticed come up in friend circles and folks that my husband and I have known in our larger circles. And I will admit, myself included, got married young. I'm 6 years younger than my husband. I was 19, he was 24 when we got married. Definitely had our trying times of marriage throughout the past 17 years now. And what I'm noticing now actually is a lot of folks who have gotten married young, maybe like in their late teens, early 20s. Maybe they've been in the marriage for a long time, like 10, 15, 20 years. They're in their 30s and 40s. They feel like they've hit a wall. And so they're at a point where they're starting to wonder if maybe they've missed out on something by either being with one partner for such a long period of time. Potentially, maybe it could have been youth, or maybe they're just really feeling like a desire to really get to know themselves individually outside of the marriage. Would you say that these couples are couples that might want to consider divorce, or might it be possible to reconnect yourself while staying married?
It depends. The divorce rate for someone who marries at age 19 or younger is 75%.
Yeah.
The reason it's so high is I bet that you were still a child, when you were 19. I mean, when you're 19, you think you're a badass, right?
Right.
But in retrospect, you look back and go, oh my God, I was a baby.
Absolutely.
No, and so here's the thing is when you're that young, like 19, 18, whatever, you're not a fully baked cake yet. Your brain is not fully developed, and that's gonna happen when you're about 26 or 27 years old. we don't know who you're going to be then. We don't
Right.
know ways in which you're going to mature. And so people change so much between the time they're 19 and 30, let's say. And so that's one risk right there is, hey, wait a minute. I thought you were going to be like this and you're actually not interested in that at all, anymore. So whether couples that marry really young and one person or both grow up within the marriage and change a lot, the question is, can each person allow and flex with the changes and growth that their spouse has done? And, you will get people who say they don't want their spouse to change. They want them to stay exactly the same over the lifespan, which is not realistic.
Yeah.
Like even if you'd have told me I was going to be a marriage crisis therapist when I was 35, I would have thought you were insane. That's an example of you don't know where life's going to take you. It's really interesting. And so if you have a spouse who is a homebody and suddenly at 35 they decide they needed more adventure in their life and they want to go out, like, are you going to be able to adapt to the new changes and the growth and stuff like that? So it really depends on the person's ability to allow the other person to grow. And then sometimes when you marry young like that, one person outgrows the other
Yeah.
and they don't really have anything in common anymore. Sometimes somebody will, and I've seen it too, when let's say a 22-year-old marries a 35-year-old and the 35-year-old really loves that she looks up to him and
Yeah.
needs him. But over that course of their marriage, she grows up and wants to be a partner and wants a seat at the table of partnership. And if he can't allow that, then they're probably not going to make it. I've actually interviewed men like this, who said when she didn't need me anymore and didn't look up to me anymore, she was no longer attractive to me anymore. So there's lots of interesting facets to it. But my antidote for it is don't get married till you're at least 30, please.
Yeah. And that's
Help
something
me.
that like I've realized as I've gotten older. I'm 36 now. And I was telling my husband, like, if we had kids, that I'd probably encourage them to not get married yet what we did. And it's funny, I'm like, yeah, we didn't really think about this when we were younger, but I'm like, now being older, I'm like, I can definitely see where our parents were coming from. They're like, wait until you're 25 or 30 or so on and so forth. I'm like, yeah, I can totally get that now. That makes a lot of sense.
And I just talked to a client today who got pregnant when she was 16. She's now 50, okay? But she gave up her youth and life got very serious for her at a very early age. And so she didn't get to go kick it up and have fun. She had to raise kids. And so now her kids are grown and she's a grandma and she's like somebody being blown out of a cannon. She's free. She wants to kick it up, and she's in the dating world. The guys are going like, "I kicked it up in college or in high school," and she's like, "Well, I didn't because I was tied down with a baby." So
Right.
now there's dynamics like that, and you're right. If you've only been with one man or one woman your whole life, and you get to be 40 or 50, I have not met a human who doesn't wonder what
Right.
it would be like to be with someone else.
Yeah.
The
And
way
I'll
it
admit
is.
that my husband and I went through a phase like that too. I know when I was in my 20s, like probably mid 20s, where I had a period of time where I kind of wondered, like, is the grass greener? What's it like to be with someone else? I'm sure he wonders the same thing. And I feel like it's completely natural, to be quite honest, just to wonder. And it's interesting because some of the folks that we've known within our circles who are navigating this stage, as you're mentioning, the other partner decided, like, I want to maybe try some new things and be a little more adventurous. One of them was like, I wonder what it's like to be with more than just this one person. I kind of want to see like what's out there. And then there are folks who are just like, I just want to kind of get to know me and see who am I, outside of a marriage. And I definitely can appreciate that because sometimes it's really hard. I know myself, I was like very much, especially when we first got married, saw my marriage as like an enmeshment with my identity. And so now, like, more proactively, my husband and I make time for things that aren't necessarily like just the two of us together all the time. Like, we do have a lot of shared interests and all that good stuff. But I've been proactively making time to like see some girlfriends, and he makes time to do his hobbies and so on and so forth. And I think it's really really important because I think for so long, especially when we were younger, like it was like us together all of the time. And now we kind of have more of that balance. And so I want to say for folks who haven't really had the time to really explore their identity outside of a relationship, how would you say that you help them kind of rediscover themselves? And is it possible to do that without blowing up the marriage?
Of course, and the thing is it's really not healthy to live in an enmeshed relationship. Our individuality is so important. And in the healthy marriage model today, you have two adults who are completely able to take care of themselves in every way. They're solid as a rock. And then they have this farm that they nurture together called the marriage. And they both take care of it, but it isn't who they are. It's a part of their life. Okay. And so I think a lot of people that start off super enmeshed and it's us, that becomes too constricting in time and they're going to want to pop off and do things on their own. And so many times it just takes a therapist to tell them it's okay to do
Right.
that. There's nothing wrong with that. You're not doing anything wrong. And finding who you are as a person alone is a crucial part of your adult development. And we encourage people to do it. I would go nuts if I didn't have that myself. Because I'm a married woman, but my individuality is super important to me. And yeah, when I was younger and married to someone else a long time ago, whether I wanted it or not, my identity seemed to be associated with whoever I was married to. I remember going to parties back then and say for my husband's career or business or something, I went along with him and everybody at the party would know him. And so I'd be standing there and they'd go, "Who are you?" And I'd go, "Well, I'm Becky." And they go, "Oh, okay." And they go, "Oh, you're Dave's wife. Oh, Dave's wife." So I got the idea that I had no value to them except as someone's wife. And that really stuck in my craw at the time. And I made a mental note back then that whether we stayed married or not, I was going to create my own identity. And one day, people's eyes were going to flash open and say, "Oh, you're Becky," instead of somebody's wife.
Right.
So I really encourage people to do that and have fun with it, have a blast.
Yeah. It's interesting because like before my husband and I had got together, like I was very much not even looking for a relationship, was never like boy crazy, nothing like that. And we're both very introverted. And I've always like loved to write and like do art and stuff like that. And so I want to say probably in the early part of our marriage, this was when we were spending like all of our time like together and doing combined things. And it took me a little while to realize that it's okay to still like have those interests. Like we have a lot of shared interests, but like my husband's not an artsy person by any means. So like it's okay to like take that time for myself to like continue doing the things that I love. And it's interesting because I had a therapist years ago who actually told me, and it was like probably only a few years maybe into our marriage at that point in time, that said something that will always kind of stick with me. That basically was like, you either will grow together or you're going to grow apart. Like there's no other way. So it's like, you're going to grow together or you're going to grow apart. And it's like, I think back to that now and I'm like, that makes sense because we're both still young and we both have so much growing to do. And thankfully, I feel like we've grown together a lot. And like as you were mentioning, like we are definitely different people than we were when we first got married. And sometimes that works out and sometimes doesn't. And so, I mean, it makes sense.
When your therapist said that, what came to mind is that thing of if your spouse can't be flexible as you change and grow, you will grow apart
Yeah.
because you won't, once you start longing to form your individuality and have a little freedom for yourself, if your spouse tries to put the stops to it, what's going to be tossed away is your spouse.
Right.
Most people, once they get that hankering for the freedom and the growth and the individuality, they're not going to give it up so their spouse can be happy. So,
Yeah.
just keep in mind that you love your partner and you want them to be happy. So you don't ever want to constrain them or put shackles on them from finding out who they are, and that's what the life journey is exploration to get to know yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like I'm actually fairly lucky in that regard because my husband's always supported all of my adventures and things that I've wanted to do, like whether that's worked out or not, like over the years, like trying a different job or trying out a different hobby. It's like I'm just here and whatever makes you happy. And so I feel like I'm pretty lucky in that regard.
You
But
are. You accidentally married a flexible person because you
yeah,
probably didn't know that when you married him.
I didn't. But yeah, I am very, very grateful. Even though it's definitely has not been easy over the years. I am grateful for that.
Look, marriage is not easy for anybody, even marriage therapists, okay? Just so y'all know, even though we know healthy dynamics and all that stuff, we've got that wild card over there, the other person who
Right.
we can't control. Because people ask me sometimes, how can marriage therapists get divorced? And I go, well, I'll tell you what, if our spouse wants to divorce us, we're going to be a divorce marriage therapist. It's very
Yep.
easy.
It's funny you mention that because my mom actually, her therapist, I think, recently got a divorce after I think being married for like 20 years or something like that. So it definitely happens for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And at least my divorces took place before I was a marriage therapist. I got my act together after I went to school or during my school years where I was super hungry to learn about healthy relationships because I really didn't want to repeat any of my past mistakes. So I really devoured the material and took it to heart too. Like, I practice what I preach, like I can tell you that not all therapists do that. Like, there were people in grad school that we had small classes, like ten people in our cohort, for example, in the PhD program. And so usually the cohort's sitting around a conference table, and that's class with the professor, and we would have conversations and some of these people would say things and I'd think to myself, "Oh my God, you're gonna be somebody's therapist.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, don't let him out of school." So, yeah. So just, just goes to show you, man, just if you find a therapist that doesn't work for you, please don't give up. Keep looking until you find
Right.
somebody that's talking to you and helping you in the way that you need to be helped.
Yeah. I've actually been pretty fortunate in that area too, because I do know that there are many people that have had a hard time finding a therapist that really jives with them. And even like, I never really thought about, what's the best fit and like what isn't a best fit. And I think honestly, like these are something that if you're not sure, like for any of our listeners, that maybe you might be seeing a therapist and feeling like, I feel like for one, your gut might be telling you, oh, I'm not, they seem a little disengaged, or whatever it is, and you might feel it in your gut, and that can, be
It's the
helpful
same
too.
way that you know if you're dating someone and you're not having a good time.
Yep, that's a good point.
I don't think I wanna date this person
That's a good way to
anymore.
look at it.
I think you get the same kind of phenomenon,
Right.
I remember having therapists in the past where I said, "Man, we've been talking for 6 months and we've never talked about what I came here for," you know? And so let me lead the conversation today and tell you why I'm here, and just don't be afraid to speak up and tell your therapist what your goals are and what you want out of it, and you can lead it if you want to. Some therapists, though, I'm very directive. I'm like a teacher in therapy. And other therapists are very laid back and just want you to talk and they'll reflect, with you. And so it just depends on like what you're looking for and what you need. I have written blogs, many a blog about how to choose a therapist and the different kinds of therapists that there are out there, because I think that's important to understand and nobody understands it. Because there's psychologists, there's marriage and family therapists, there's social workers, there's mental health counselors, there's pastoral counselors. Everybody has completely different training and philosophies. I could help everybody right now and just say, no, here's a shortcut. Always choose a marriage and family therapist.
Right. That,
Because
that's actually
I can just speak to you and say, like, I love our training. I think our training is bar none, the best, because we think of families as systems and
right.
so it's just not focused on one person. We think like if you're upset, we want to know about how your whole family system is operating and how that might be affecting that. I think that is so rich and effective. So do your homework, study about the different kinds of educations and philosophies and stuff. If you want Freud, go with
Right.
psychologists.
Yeah, that's really a good point because actually I know someone who actually navigated a divorce who had seen initially I believe it was a pastoral therapist actually because she was Christian, and the therapist said that they were always going to be on the side of marriage and that they were never going to tell them that they needed to divorce. But they got to the point where the signs were kind of all there. And so it kind of leads into my next question. So for those who are struggling with the idea of a divorce because of strong religious beliefs, how might you help them kind of discern whether it's truly time to walk away or if there's nothing more to be done?
Well, I think once again, I'm not a super informed of biblical I mean, I was raised a Methodist, but kind of like spiritual, but not religious these days, right? Vaguely familiar with some of the Christian concepts and stuff. But what I do know about what Christianity and really almost every religion has in mind is love and compassionate ideas, right? And so I don't believe when you're dealing with religious concepts that you can find one that's healthy, that encourages suffering and staying in situations that are not healthy for you because some guy in the sky wants you to.
Right.
I don't believe in stuff like that. I believe if God is love, for example, he doesn't want you to stay and suffer with someone who's verbally or emotionally abusive or neglectful or cruel or anything like that. So, and I've talked to many religious leaders who agree with me that if something's killing your soul, if a relationship's killing your soul, I don't think there's a religion in the world that is being interpreted correctly that would tell you to stay in your whole life through and suffer through that.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, we all know every religion has far extreme views within that religion. I'm saying to everybody, any far extreme religion that would tell you you have to stay in an abusive relationship or whatever, a cheater, constant cheating, then it's misinterpreted. I just really believe that. I really believe that we're supposed to be happy, content, find peace and compassion. If we're around friends, biological family, or spouses that don't enhance our life spiritually, then maybe we should weed them out.
Yeah, 100%. And for anyone who might be on the receiving end of a divorce, for that partner that maybe didn't want the divorce and we're still trying, how might you help someone cope when they might feel like that choice wasn't theirs?
It's so painful. I call myself the marriage crisis manager. And the people who typically find me first are the leaning in partners, the ones whose spouses have announced, I think I want a divorce or I think I want out. And so the leaning in partner, the one who wants to save the marriage, is freaking out. And they're Googling all over looking for someone like me to talk to and help them guide them and give them good information. And, the first step for them is to work to stabilize themselves because their nervous systems are activated. They're in a fight, flight, or freeze response. And so none of us are rational when we're in that state of mind. So I point that out to them, and then we work on ways where we can get them to come out of the nervous system activation and be calm. And when you're calm, then you can control yourself. And then when you're doing that, you don't want to chase after your spouse or pursue them or love bomb them when their back is turned toward the marriage. You're going to give them some space and time, and we're going to slow everything down. There's no reason to be in a hurry to make any decisions. And we just work for a stabilization and hopefully bring both people in so we can have adult conversations about what's possible. So I tell leaning in partners, you've got to be detached from the outcome, as Buddha said, which is your future's a question mark. We don't know what's going to happen, but there's things we can do to try and finesse it to give you the outcome that you most desire. But we can't guarantee it. And you've got to believe that no matter what happens, the universe is working for you and that you're going to land on your feet and you're going to have great things in your life. And one of the mantras I give leaning in partners is to say, I don't know what the future holds, but I'm smart, I'm capable, and I can figure anything out. So I'm safe. So if you can count on yourself, you can be okay in almost any situation.
That's so beautifully said. And I find myself thinking along similar lines throughout my life whenever I'm like feeling frustrated or I'm unsure of something, is really kind of putting that energy into the universe and those positive thoughts, thinking that I am worthy and that the universe will provide, and being confident in that. And it's really helped me. And actually so many people that I know as well, some close friends of mine talk about like similar topics, and it's just like so helpful. And we all provide each other with like this really enriching and uplifting energy.
So it's a very nourishing thing. It's a predictor of brain health moving forward. It's like beautiful. Keep it up. And those of you out there that are lacking community, create one. I can't tell you how many lonely people there are, and many of my clients wish they had more friends. So go out and get them.
Oh, 100%. I want to speak on that too, because I've went through periods of time in my life where I felt like I was lacking community. Maybe my friends are at a different stage of life, or maybe they've moved. And actually this year, at the beginning of the year, it's kind of like my New Year's resolution, so to speak, is to kind of start recreating that community and making those connections. And I've already made some really great friends in the past 7 months, 8 months now. And it could be hard for a lot of folks. And I know for me, I kind of put it off for like a year. I'm like, I don't know if I'm really ready yet. It seems a little intimidating, but it's so worth it.
It is worth it. And I know it can be hard for people. People are intimidated, but I think there's so many ways that you can go about it. Like some of the best friends I made, for example, were in graduate school. So if you go through some sort of training or some sort of program or some sort of workshop, those are great places to meet people. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably hungry for good information and inspiration. And so you can go, there's plenty of online communities and in-person places where you can go to workshops and spiritual growth trainings and whatnot. That's what I would be doing if I was looking for a community, or even book clubs and things like that. And even tennis and golf. And I've got lots of clients that have made friends through things like that. Pickleball. So get out there, stop talking about it and go do it.
100%. But speaking of books, your book title is so relatable. I think I want out. What inspired you to write it? And was there anyone specific that you had in mind when writing it?
Yeah. Well, as I told you earlier, when I discovered that mother lode of information and I was so appalled that marriage therapists didn't really seem aware of it. And I knew also that lay people non therapists would go nuts and be thrilled to know this information as well. So from the moment I left school in 2006, I had a book in my head. I knew this had to get out there. And I started trying to sell my book idea 20 years ago and got, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rejections. And so what would happen is I'd pursue it for a while and get so many rejections, and then I'd go dormant. And then every few years I'd come back and try again and get rejected again. And so let's see, about 4 years ago, I looked at the calendar and said, "Holy God, Becky, you're getting old. And if you don't get that book out there, you're never going to get it out there. I mean, this is like do or die time." So I decided to go ahead and finish the book because I don't know if your listeners know, but most nonfiction writers, self help writers, they write 3 chapters of a book and then they pitch them around to agents and publishers. And if they buy it, then you finish the other chapters, like so. But you got to tell them what's going to be in the other chapters. So I decided, though, no, I'm going to write the whole dang thing. So I hired an editor to help give me guidance and make sure it was perfect. We worked together for 1 year and knocked it out from 330 pages with 11 or 12 graphics that I created myself. And she has been in the book publishing business for many years, and she kept telling me throughout the whole thing that this is amazing. She's like, "This is so needed. I have friends I want to show it to right now." So her encouragement, and just she really helped inspire me and make all the difference that it was a worthy thing. And then she helped me pitch it when it was ready to be pitched. And her helping me pitch it is what took it over the finish line in the end. She knew somebody, called them, and they bought it within 24 hours. Now, this is almost unbelievable because I couldn't get any. People used to always tell me, "This is too negative. This is too negative. Marriage crisis. Oh, getting a divorce, that's too negative. Becky, if you can just save every marriage in the end, we might be interested." And I'm like, "Oh, come on. This is not Disneyland. I'm talking about real life here and real problems, and this is serious." So, yeah, so the book is an all-encompassing overview of how marriages die and how to deal with the marriage crisis when it inevitably comes, and all the things that you need to consider and sort through. And if you're going to separate, how to do it wisely. And if you're going to divorce, how to do it amicably. And always considering the children. And it's got step parenting dynamics in it, co parenting dynamics, and it tells you how you got in the mess in the first place. So it's
Yeah.
for therapists to learn, and it's for people whose marriages are struggling, or there are people who are considering divorce or who are in a full-blown marriage crisis. And I'm just filling a void, everybody. There's nothing like this out there. And I've gotten nothing but lots of validation from my colleagues. When I present on it at conferences, people run up to me and they're hungry to know more about it. So I'm hoping that my goal of making it more mainstream and available to more and more people, finding people like me who can oversee their marriage crisis, is going to be more commonplace. That's what I hope.
Yeah. And I actually kind of want to touch on that because your book speaks to couples and kind of in that gray zone where things are feeling off. And kind of to that point, is there and I know there's like not a one size like fits all for this, but where sometimes people talk at nauseum before they agree on divorce, or maybe sometimes one person leaves and the other person like had no clue it was coming.
Right.
Is there like I guess an ideal way or a way of suggestion that you might say go about it for maybe a partner who has maybe what it's one partner in the relationship that might be feeling, well, I'm outgrowing this relationship. Is there a way that they might kind of go about move forward with a divorce or even a separation that they might consider before taking those steps?
One of my priorities in the book was to teach people to be aware of how marriages deteriorate, and they deteriorate in 5 distinct stages. And this is one of the things that every couple should know about, period, end of ball game. Because if you are aware of it, then you'll notice when you've entered the process and you'll see yourself dropping down the stages. Okay. And so if there's 5 stages of a dying marriage, I want individuals to take action at stage 2 and not wait until stage 4 or 5, which is when I find them. When they come to me is when the thing is so bad,
Yeah.
the damage so deep, the pain and resentment and lack of trust so huge that now our odds are against us, and it's going to take every miracle in the world to turn it around. If we could find it early on when it's first starting to sink, and what I want people to do is when you first realize that your marriage problems, that your unhappiness in your marriage is serious, it's been bothering you for a while and it's not going away. You've got to speak out loud with your mouth using words. I'm struggling in the marriage. I'm seriously struggling, and we need to do something about it. Tell your spouse, give them a chance to make it right, and go get professional help, please. All you've got people out there that have trouble asking for help, this is a time when you need to swallow pride and go get a marriage therapist, because you won't believe the difference that we can make and the insights that we can show you and help you with and the things we can teach you. So the worst thing in the world is being miserable in your marriage and keeping it a secret and not telling your spouse. And here's the thing too. If you have kids and the kids find out that you didn't give their parent a chance to make it right and you just dropped the bomb on them and that was it, they will resent you. Your kids will resent you. The kids are they'll analyze this whole thing for years. They'll want to know that it was fair. Even though it was sad and awful and they hated the divorce, did you treat my mom or dad fairly in the departure process? So that's another reason that you want to have integrity in this and speak out. Like I talked to a guy about 2 months ago who said, "Oh, I spoke out. I spoke out." And I said, "With your words?" He goes, "No, but I would pout on the couch." He's like, "Oh, I would refuse to go to the picnic." And I'm like, "So you wanted your wife to deduce that you were unhappy and struggling, but that's not enough. You have to explicitly tell them with your words, I'm struggling, I'm unhappy, and we need to do something." That's like this huge chunk of advice that I think would make a huge difference if people would apply it.
Oh, absolutely. That like couldn't be better said because I've known folks, that have been on that receiving end and they're just like had no idea it was coming and completely devastated. And when my husband and I were contemplating going that route, we had a lot of open conversation and in-depth conversation about what that might look like. And I think these are really important conversations to have. I mean, I know there are certain instances, like if there are abuse where you maybe can't communicate that, and that's a whole separate thing. But I think if it's just, I'm not feeling it or I'm unhappy, I feel like it's definitely a conversation to be had. I know we're at time, but I'm so excited for your book.
Thank
And
you.
I know our listeners will be as well. And can you tell us where our listeners can find you, connect with you, and maybe purchase your
Sure.
book?
Sure. The book is I Think I Won Out What to Do When One of You Wants to End Your Marriage. And it's on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all online booksellers, Target, Walmart. And you can get it in audio, digital, and hard copies. And you find me at marriagecrisismanager.com. And I also have a blog on Medium that teaches people everything I know. And I just posted one today about women chasing men and not realizing their power in their relationships with men. And so I'm trying to get women to stop being needy to men and recognize their power. So I'm teaching everything I know in my blog. And so that's on the Medium platform. And look under Becky Whetstone there, and you'll find maybe 200 blogs that I've been writing over the past 8 years. So
Awesome. Well, I'll make sure I
continue
get that
this.
all of our show notes below, and I'll be checking that out as well.
Good. Let me know what you think.
Absolutely. I'm so excited. It's been such a pleasure. And I
Yeah.
know our listeners are going to love this episode. So thank you so much for such a wonderful conversation.
Thank you, Valerie. You were great. Thanks, everybody, for listening.
Awesome. Thanks, Becky. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.